Hi, we are Richard and Jaci Mun-Gavin, and we love family and we believe in the value of parenting.
We understand that parenting is probably the hardest job that you've ever done and the most important job you've ever done. And so in today's session, we hope that the topic that we're going to cover is going to be helpful for you. So it's session 3, and we have spoken about the purpose of parenting, that we're wanting to reflect God in this earth. We're wanting to be His representatives in the way that we deal with our children. We want to raise them to rule over the earth, to steward the earth, and we want to raise them to release redemption as well. So there are ways that we are going to need to, things that we're going to need to implement in order to put this into place. And the number one thing that I want to talk about this session, we're going to tackle an atmosphere of love. That above all things, our children need to know, they need to be raised in an environment of love.
Yeah, we see in Song of Songs that it says, a banner over me, let your banner over me be love, as it's a story of love between two people, and I know many theologians, it's a story of God with His people.
Yes.
But as we represent the Father heart of God, we desire that the banner over our children should be love. It represents the Father heart of God, and that would differentiate from let the banner over our children be provision, let the banner over our children be equipping, let the banner over our children be whatever it may be. Sometimes we think that we are doing really well because we provided, or because and we may well be doing that, but the scriptures say, let your banner over me be love. Absolutely. And I think that represents the Father heart of God best.
Absolutely. And so that is the atmosphere we're wanting to create, that if our children were to refer to us, they wouldn't just think of us as mum and dad who provided for me, or mum and dad who disciplined me, or mum and dad who cheered for me at every gala and every sports day, but actually mum and dad who really loved me above all else. And love is something, it is an essential need of every human. We all desperately want to know that we're truly loved. It makes our lives worth something. It gives them value. And love looks like very specific things. Yeah. And these have been taught about in many different forums because I think it's such an important topic. Yeah. Love looks like being present, being observant, being available, and being generous. Just those are the 4 things that we're going to look at today of how to express love. Being present, being observant, being available, and being generous.
Yeah, as we start off and just look at being present, I think we understand that best for those of us that have a faith, that we know that God is present with us. He's involved in our daily lives. We can approach Him at any time. So I know that kind of skips over to availability, but just being present. And the most common thing attributed to presence is time spent with somebody.
Absolutely.
And so we would look to in the atmosphere of love, we would say we look to give quality time to our children.
And it does sometimes look like rescheduling our diaries and actually putting it into our diaries, that whatever it looks like for you, whatever you're going to do, because we're all unique and we mustn't feel that because somebody is doing something that we need to do that. But for example, we've had chat dates. We've scheduled a coffee date with, not coffee for our little kiddies, but we've scheduled a chat date where we take a child out and spend time with them. But I know that we are all very busy. Parents are busy these days. Children are busy, and time is of the essence. It's a very rare commodity in many of our homes and families. Yeah. And so I want to give you a little key that might help you. The 9 most important minutes in a child's life, in a child's day. That the 9 most important minutes, if we can get these 9 minutes right, our children will feel that we are present with them. And so the first 3 minutes, the 3 minutes when they wake up, that as they wake up in the morning, that vulnerable moment, that moment of wanting to process what their brain has been processing, they always want to share their dreams, don't they? What I dreamt about, and a little bit of processing, a little bit of connecting when they haven't yet dressed in their armor for the day, so to speak. Those 3 minutes, the 3 minutes when they come back from whatever their daily activity is, whether your kids are going to school or whatever their case is, the 3 minutes when they re-engage into their home environment, they can drop their school bags, drop their blazers, drop their defense, whatever it is that they can drop, and to be there in that moment if possible. And then the 3 minutes before they go to bed, that 3 minutes of being able to pull them onto your lap, have a prayer, do whatever it is that you choose to do. But those 9 minutes, if we can get those 9 minutes right, it really does help to thread together our presence in the day.
Yeah, I think that was so helpful for me, certainly as a dad who works outside of the house. It was so liberating for me when we learnt of that study, that psychological research that was done for those minutes, and I could reorder some of my priorities, because let's face it, we can all give 3 minutes to our children when they wake up. Maybe as those that work outside of the house, we can't necessarily have the 3 minutes when they engage back in the family in the middle of the day, but we can also give the 3 minutes as they go to bed. And just by shifting that, it takes off so much pressure. I think sometimes we feel so much pressure as parents that we've got to give hours and hours and hours, and we think like we can't keep up, because there's some parents that are able to watch every sports game for the hour of the warm-up, for the hour warm-down after, and sometimes that's just not, for very few people is that possible. And I think this study has just given such liberation to us to know that we can work hard and we can parent well and create an atmosphere of love in the home.
Absolutely. And it's about being present in the home. So I know sometimes when we're at home, when you would arrive home, you don't always drive in the gate straight away. One
of the things that I started doing was I realized that it sometimes took me a little bit of time to disengage from my work. And so I would drive home and I would get in the door, but my mind, I would be there physically, and my kids all want to run to me, which I'm so grateful for. They would run and say hello and they want to engage with me, and I'm just not in the mental space to be present with them. So I'm there physically, but not emotionally. And so I started the habit of coming home, driving in my driveway outside of my gate, and just processing, responding to whatever messages I needed to respond to on my phone, any emails, and just getting myself, ending my work day before driving into my home, so that when I walked through the door, I was emotionally available and present with our kids.
Absolutely. And then when we're present, we also want to be observant. We want to not just be present in the room or even present in the company, but actually we want to be observant. We want to have our attention towards our children. God is, I mean, how many of us love the statement that God knows the number of hairs on our heads? We love to be known. We want to be, we all have this heart cry to be known. We had the unfortunate experience of being at a few funerals recently of young people with kids, and I remember listening to the way that in the one case, in fact both of them were moms, the way that these moms were being described by the husbands, by the family, and I just thought, wow, I so desperately want my family to know me, to know not just you're a great mom and you always provided for us and you cooked very nicely, thank you very much, which my kids would
not
say.
Even.
No, okay, you're a great mom even though you couldn't cook very nicely, but that they would know me, the way you laugh at this, the way that you enjoy this, the way that the sunrise means this to you. We want to be known. And how many of us have heard teenagers say to their parents to write off the relationship and say, you just don't understand me. And so obviously to be observant, to know our children is so important. It's one of the things that we love about our relationship with our God, that he knows us. Yeah,
and I think you've got a story around the whale which really speaks into that, so far better than we could possibly talk. I think that story tells of that.
Yes, there's a story of a lady who went to her friend. She was having trouble with her teenager, and she said to her friend, can you help me? My teenager is impossible. And her friend said, no problem. Why don't you come with me for the day? I'm going whale watching on a boat. So come with me for the day and we can talk about your teenager while we're there. So they went off on the boat, and the mum of the teenager was telling of all her problems, and the friend that had taken her on the boat was just watching out at sea, and a whale surfaced, and she said to the mum of the teenager, did you see it? And she said, no, I didn't see it, I missed it. And she carried on talking, and the other one carried on watching, and the whale surfaced again, and she said, did you see it this time? And again, the person who had come along for the ride was missing every time the whale surfaced. And eventually her friend turned to her in great wisdom and said to her, you know, parenting a teenager, parenting in general, is very much like whale watching. you need to understand the whale. You need to understand the speed it's swimming and to be able to predict its behavior, when it's going to surface again, when it's going to have this moment of vulnerability, because it's not all the time.
Yeah.
And in those moments when you're now expecting, I've watched this child, I've watched this whale, I'm expecting that this is going to be a moment of a connect point, a touch point, that I can really communicate with them and they'll be open to me and to a relationship. At that point, we don't harpoon the whale. We don't take that moment of vulnerability to say, right, I finally got your attention and now I can sort you out.
Yeah.
And I think that is so key. We want to know our children. They're not always open to us. Sometimes they're in the middle of a game and they're busy and we have arrived home and we want to connect with them, but they're not open to it.
Yeah.
And we need to understand our children. That's why those 3 minutes are helpful. But then also to, in that moment, don't harpoon the whale. Don't take a swipe at your child in that moment of vulnerability. In your observance of them, don't use what you know about them to hurt them, but rather to help them and to connect with them in that moment.
Yeah, we're very grateful. I mean, we practice this. We try to practice it as best we can. We don't always get it right. But we as a family went through quite a traumatic event quite recently with our daughter being in a car accident. And there was one evening we were sitting around as a family, and I just noticed that our eldest boy, who was 12 at the time, I lose track of time, just took himself off to the bedroom while we were all there. Didn't make a scene, just went off. And as a parent, sometimes there are just those moments that you're so grateful that you caught. And I saw it, and I got myself up and I went to him, and he was just lying on the bed. And I remember I didn't even need to say anything. I just put my hand on him and he just broke down in tears as the trauma, as a little 12-year-old had experienced the trauma but not been able to vocalize it, hadn't been given the attention because it hadn't yet turned onto them. And in that moment, I was able to just lie with him for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And he just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and then it was done. And I think it's those kinds of things that where, as parents, if our atmosphere is love, if we are present and we're observant, we're able to catch those moments that are deep formation moments for our children.
Exactly. And we have to remember that this whole session, what we're saying is that we're wanting to reflect God. We're wanting to imitate Him. I don't know if you remember the story in Genesis, I think it is as well. Yes, where Abraham has his wife Sarah and the maidservant Hagar, and Hagar's mistreated. She's pregnant and she runs away into the desert. She's a young girl with no social standing. She's probably a slave. She has no rights, and yet God notices her in the desert. He's observant. He sees this moment with her, and He meets her and He meets her need. And in that moment she realizes that the God of Abraham and the God of her master actually sees her, and she renames God. You are the God who sees me. And it's just, for me, the most beautiful name for God. And if we want to represent God, we have to be parents who see our children.
Yeah.
So we're present, we're observant, and we need to be available. This, again, represents God in such an important way. God opened up heaven to us at the greatest cost. At the cost of His Son, He opened up His availability to us again. And so we also want to be available to our children and to let them know that even though our days may be busy and we may be caught up in a meeting for the time being, they are still our priority. And at the soonest availability, we will make sure that we open ourselves up to them and that they are able to approach us.
Yeah, and I think also parenting teaches your children how you are available. So Jackson and me, we have different availability styles. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology, but the kids available. They have to learn how we're available. And so we know with our eldest daughter, who's 18 at this present time, she's had to learn that she can come and ask me. She's always felt, I'll wait for Dad to have a gap. The reality is I fill my day with my children or with my work or with Jax. I fill my day. So she always has access into that, and she's had to learn to come and ask me to be available, and then I will be available. And so parenting is also about teaching our children the terms of how to make the approach.
Absolutely, and I think that you've done that well, because she didn't pick that up at first. It was a disconnect. She didn't understand how Richard was available, but he didn't leave it at that. He fought for it. He said, why haven't you come and told me your news? Why have I heard this news from Mum and not from you? I want to be connected with your day. So he's fought for it, and she's now realized, so she's got a phone, she's an older child, and when she now gets home from school, that 3 minutes, she actually connects with Richard via WhatsApp. She'll send him a message, Dad, this was what my day was like at school. And I love that he's coached her into understanding that he's available to her, even though he looks busy. And I think that is beautiful, and it shows that as parents we have the freedom to teach our children how to approach us. God has again taught us how to approach him, and so we're able to do that with our kids as well. And we need them to know that we're present, we're observant, and we're available to them.
Then the fourth element to the atmosphere of love and how we do this is generosity, being generous. And so we see that in Genesis chapter 1, just in the creation account, God is absolutely lavish and generous with what he creates and how he creates, and the color and the beauty and the magnificence and the variety. He's just overboard. We heard recently that we are discovering new species at 18,000 a year, and it's still going to take 360,000 years to discover all the species that there are on the earth. Something ridiculous like that. Don't quote me on it.
Don't quote me
but
on
it's just lavish and generous.
It's lavish and generous, and the reason why we've included this in our atmosphere of love is because love is generosity, in the sense that love, so God puts seeds into all the plants and into the trees, into the animals. They were able to reproduce after their own kind, and that's a very generous thing to do, because the plants and the animals were no longer dependent on him in order to create new life. And I think that's an important point for us as parents. We're raising our children, and it is a delightful feeling to be the center of a little kiddie's life, for them to feel, I sometimes feel like the sun, and they all just revolve around me. It's the most beautiful feeling. But I did not have kids for my benefit. I did not have kids for me to enjoy feeling like I'm the source of their joy. And so we need to make sure that we also give them the freedom to become independent. So God gave the plants and the animals the ability to become independent, and we want to do that too. He also gave humankind free will. He gave them the ability, gave us the ability to make our own decisions, to be self-determining creatures. And this is not easy when it comes to children. It's not easy to give our children the right to make their own decisions and to make their own choices. But love is generous. Love is for them. It's not for us. We didn't have children so that they could make us feel good about ourselves and make us feel loved. And I think specifically as our kids grow older, which is bringing this one in at the back end here of love, as they grow older, we want to set them up for their own lives and to have their own journeys and to be reproducing life of their own, and not for them to be dependent on us. That's not our goal. Our goal is for them to be independent and to be that generous with our love that we're raising them up to be on their own and to be able to continue without us, which is a very self-sacrificing thing to do. And then you mentioned beauty, and I just wanted to tie that in, that God's generosity created a lot of beauty in creation. And that's so important, because beauty is the antidote to trauma. A beautiful environment just undoes what a harsh world does in our lives. And so I think that if we're speaking about an atmosphere, a home atmosphere of love, it's actually also incumbent upon us to make that atmosphere beautiful. Even if that means such silly little things as putting on beautiful music and doing our best within our budget to have beautiful decor and to create an environment, to create an oasis for our children, that they can come there, and when they arrive in our home, to the best of our ability, we're generous towards them as well, not just to guests, not just to people on the outside, but they arrive into an atmosphere where they can enjoy, where it's generous, where it's lovely, where they can undo some of the harshness of the world, and where they can feel safe and loved as we observe them and as we're available to them and as we're present with them.
And so this session, creating an atmosphere of love in your home, we would say, why don't you take some time just to give consideration to these things, to your presence, to your observance, to your availability and to your generosity in your parenting with your children.